Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
How have you been?
Can't complain. Busier than ever,
yes.
as you are.
Yes, thank you.
Feel great and chamomile.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Excellent.
I wouldn't have anticipated this last 12 months.
Well, it's a year, isn't it? Since the
You
change.
just had the anniversary of 1 year as Labour leader.
Yeah, okay.
Did it go fast for you?
Water torture, I think.
You said so slow.
Water torture. I mean, I think from 1996 to 97, that was tough.
Yes.
Tough. Or 93 to 94, tough,
Yes.
tough.
What about your first year as Prime Minister? Did that go fast?
That went really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I only had a very brief vacation. Obviously, I didn't leave the country.
Yes.
And I climbed the Ball Pass,
Yes.
I think. But then the year just went in a flash. But it was not an easy year either.
Yeah, no, that's right. I am finding it that it's moved incredibly quickly, but there's been lots of things that I've wondered because there are so few people who have the chance to be in this job, let alone be in the job as a woman. And so I accumulate all these questions.
Yes.
Which I thought I might ask you.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I get asked this a lot. Did you ever, in your wildest dreams, think that you would end up in this role?
No. No, never.
Never?
No.
Even when you were an MP?
Not for years, because when I came in, there had only ever been 3 women ministers. Mabel in 1947, Dame Hilda Ross in the early 60s, and then Fetu in the third Labour government. So that was it. So the height of your ambition was maybe one day you could be a minister.
Yes.
And that remained the height of ambition probably until around the time I became Deputy Prime Minister in 89. People started saying it would be a possibility. Maybe one day, because it was still a very male-dominated party caucus in Parliament. And it didn't really become a possibility till the early 90s.
So who were your role models then? Were they outside of politics growing up? Did you...
There was Mum, of course, who'd been a teacher, and I always thought I'd be a teacher like Mum. There was my teachers. I had a very amazing history teacher who later became Professor of History at Otago, and she opened our eyes and our sheltered little lives to the Vietnam War and other big issues. Then I went to university. There was Associate Professor Ruth Butterworth, who was an icon because hardly any woman ever got to the top in academia. There were very few women staff. A lot of women students, but very few staff. And then when I was in politics, you had the women from South Asia who all came out of family dynasties who got to the top, but that wasn't relevant to us. So probably Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Norwegian PM, in the 80s would have been the one that I would have noticed and thought,
So you had to look quite far.
You had to look a long way, because Margaret Thatcher was not an appropriate role model either, nor Golda Meir, completely different settings. So that was it.
Yeah. See, I do consider myself very lucky when people ask me that similar question, because of course I had you, and I grew up, seeing women in those leadership roles. However, I still didn't see myself ever being in this role. So I wonder a little bit, do you think it's a confidence issue? Or, if we've got young women now, and I hear that similar theme coming through, that not being able to see themselves in those roles, there are people that are modelling that they can, but they still don't.
So I wonder if you are actually the last generation which would have been asking those questions as a young person as to whether you could do it, because you were 17, 18, 20, 21 years ago.
Yes.
But this was just when Jenny Shipley became the first PM. And then the last 2 decades plus, there's been a woman PM more than half the time. So I think girls today, they know it's possible. Now, the question is, will they see themselves doing it? And I think encouraging them to step up and move in is the important thing.
I totally agree with you. I think the modelling is there, but I still think that so many young women harbour that self-doubt. And I wonder, is that inherent in our girls, or is there something else going on? And I worry about that because I hear it a lot.
I think it can be overcome, but for sure men are much more likely to put themselves forward when they're not fully qualified, whereas women want to be 100% qualified. And that's the barrier that we've got to get over.
I actually share a story of yours that I heard you say once when I'm asked questions about confidence. When you came back and spoke in a lecture at AUT, you said that when you were looking for your next role and thinking about what you would do after being Prime Minister, that someone approached you about the UNDP job and that your first response was, oh no, I'm not sure about that. I haven't got that experience in aid and development. And their reply was, Helen, you've been the Prime Minister. And I thought, if anyone, if Helen still at that point is saying, looking at the deficit and saying, I don't have those skills, then who is anyone else to think that they don't have enough to
That's
measure up?
right.
Yeah.
It makes the point, doesn't it? That we do want to know that we can do it, and maybe we just don't need to have that level of self-assurance.
Do you ever remember feeling really angry in politics because you were confronted by just this blatant sense that you couldn't do or achieve what you wanted to because you were a woman?
Oh, yes. There were some obstacles when I first ran for Parliament because people didn't see a woman in the job. And why would they? In Auckland, there had only ever been one woman Member of Parliament elected in a by-election.
That's just astounding to me.
A by-election in 1941, and she was defeated in the 1943 general election. That was it. So then I came along. But people got used to it, and I was well accepted.
But you were young and a woman.
I was young, and I was female and single, and I had radical ideas.
The youth and being a woman, did that compound?
Yeah, that compounded it probably. You know, if I'd been maybe in my late 30s, early 40s and had a family, that mightn't have been the same issues, but there were a lot of issues. But anyway, we saw those off. But then they came back with a vengeance when I became leader of the opposition. Yeah. And I've often reflected on the fact that really the main barriers I've faced in life have been from people who didn't have the same view as I did that women could do anything. Yeah. They found all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't be doing it. But it wasn't labelled as the fact that you're a woman. It was it ever that blatant? Yes, it was that blatant. But I could never comment on it because if you comment on it, that in itself is like a sign that it's getting to you. Yep. So you just had to turn a deaf ear to it.
That bit hasn't changed.
That has not changed. So, you know, if you're strong, you're tough. You know, they don't like the way you look. They don't like the way you dress. That actually don't like anything about you because you're a woman doing things that they're not used to women doing.
Did you feel that you then were in a position where people were encouraging you to try and change things about yourself to fit the stereotype as well of what a politician was meant to be? Because the stereotype, I guess, in when you were in politics was very male-based because they were predominantly male. Did you feel that pressure?
There were a lot of pressures, and in politics you make compromises and choices, obviously, because you want your party to do well and you want to do well yourself. You know, I've often reflected on the fact that I would have never got married if it hadn't been I was about to go into Parliament and it seemed like it could be a liability. Now, you know, here I am. That was 1981. This is 2018. I mean, I would have had a long-term relationship whether it was a marriage certificate or not, but it mattered to some people. It didn't matter to me. So there was that, and then you did have to stamp your foot as a woman because you can't just be, you know, a carpet that people are going to walk over. You've got to stamp your authority on.
Do you think you end up having to do that more?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I first came in, these statements about what an effective opposition MP was meant to be like, and you know, there was this notion that unless you had claimed scalps in Parliament, that you weren't, unless you were aggressive and assertive, then you weren't a successful politician.
But then they mark women down for that. The opposition leader's role is a very difficult role, and you're very lucky you only had it for 7 weeks. And for most of that, Parliament wasn't sitting.
Yeah, that's right.
But your job is to destroy the government. So of course you've got to be on the attack, but then that can be played very negatively against women.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got the 125th anniversary, 1893, which is the year before my grandmother was born, so it's a long time ago. But what for you have been the significant milestones if you reflect back for women?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that I always talk about when we talk about the progress that we've made, or that I at least think about, that yes, we have the significant milestones of our first female Prime Minister, our first elected female Prime Minister. We have the period when we had our first female Speaker, Chief Justice, Governor-General, all significant milestones. But I worry that sometimes we've perhaps used that as a way to define our progress when the markers for women every day have still lagged. The gender pay gap, and pay equity issues, intimate partner violence, the dominance of women in the low-paid work. So those are the things that I feel that we need to now keep focused on, because actually at that high level we have hit a number of milestones.
If you think of the policy milestones, without doubt the Equal Pay Act of the early 70s was crucial.
Yes.
And interesting that when the care workers got their pay equity settlement, it was going back to the principles of the Equal Pay Act.
Was.
I tried as Minister of Labour with pay equity legislation, which was repealed immediately.
In
Our
fact,
government was defeated, but good that people went back to the original act and said, what's the intent?
I think a unit that you set up started a pay claim many years ago that, because of all of the disruption in this area, we only just signed off this week.
Amazing.
So, but, you know, and the fact that that was the first now under those pay equity principles properly, it feels like we're at the beginning of something that people thought probably we should have resolved a long time ago.
You see, there's other things we take for granted, like the benefit for the single parent.
Of course.
But that only came with the third Labor government. And before that, the single mother was under incredible pressure to hand her baby over for adoption. And there were very brave women who fought that and campaigned for the legislation. So that has been so empowering for the single parent, whether single when they had the children or leaving a relationship for a range of reasons.
Financial security.
And clearly with the rate of family and domestic violence in New Zealand, a lot of women do leave abusive relationships and they have to have financial security. That's a great milestone that your government's just passed, which is the right to paid leave while you cope with getting your family out of that violence and into something else.
And that, you know, that is really a first on the international stage. Sad that we're having to champion that because we have such staggering rates of domestic violence even now. But after 125 years, though, you know, what do you think needs to be the next significant barrier to overcome?
So I think we're in the third phase of feminism. The first phase was Kate Shepherd and the ladies here and around the world who fought for the suffrage. I think the second phase came with the post-war baby boomers, and it was around the time I was at university. Sue Kedgley set up women's liberation. There was the women's electoral lobbies, a big push on that. And in a way, I think we might have made it look easy for the next generation because people went off feminism a bit. They said, oh, we've done all that. But actually, I think now the third phase with the Me Too movement has brought out a lot of other issues. And for me, I look at the issue of sexual and gender-based violence and I say, if a woman cannot be safe in her home, if she cannot be safe in her community, this is an incredible blight on her developing her full potential. You'll never have gender equality while these rates of violence persist. It is a serious problem in New Zealand, and I think for women, just we have to beat it, if I could use that phrase. There is the residual pay gap. It's under 10% now, which is great, and it's not what it was, but it's still got to be overcome. It'll partly be overcome by women and men having similar life patterns, when men, like Clark, who I fully applaud, do a bit more of the child-minding and rearing.
Co-parenting.
That will even up the odds.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I do, you know, when we look at those raft of challenges in front of us, though, do you think enough of that next generation are willing to grab on to that feminist title? Because I go into schools now and I'll sometimes have people ask me if I'm a feminist, and I have no hesitation. And I'll then ask all of them, do you believe that women and men should have equal opportunities, equal rights? Because if you believe in equality, in my view, you're a feminist. Do you think it's possible to define?
I think the young women are very interested now. The young women who are speaking up about the sexual predation in the law firms that they were subjected to. And I'm just seeing a whole new level of interest from the under-20s, the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings who say, yeah, look, things aren't right, but, you know, we're going to be part of the change that has to happen. And I think that's fantastic.
So do you think it is possible? Because I feel like there's almost this need to reclaim the word and not be afraid to use it, you know, and the negativity that some of the next generation perhaps perceive around feminism. We need to really shake that off and say that actually it's still very relevant, hugely relevant.
Yes, and part of it is leaders like us saying, yes, we're feminists. We've always been feminists. What does it mean? It's about full equality for women making their own choices, not having other people make them for them.
And who could argue with that?
Yeah, and also acknowledging that there are parts of the world, which sadly now include the United States of America, where there's a rollback on women's rights. But at the same time, we applaud the progress in Ireland and in Chile. You know, this is encouraging. So just being part of an international solidarity for women to have the right to make your own decisions about your own life and not have any legal, social or cultural or economic barriers in your way.
I have to admit, one of the things that when I came back, I reflected. Someone asked me actually about the United States and the distance between their provisions and lack of and ours around maternity leave. I actually now see maternity leave as a health issue. Women need time to recover, and I just can't imagine a situation where you wouldn't have that support to actually be well again and make sure that you've got, as well as make sure your baby is a little bit stronger. So it was a real learning, probably a key learning for me there.
I was at a dinner in recent days where a woman who'd also gone back to work after having children said, Jacinda's so brave. She said, I know what it's like, yes. And I wasn't in the public eye.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think everyone is really full of admiration. Yeah. But the reality is your body's been through so much. It's carried a baby for 9 months, and then you've given birth, and then you're adjusting from that. So you need that rest. And you're right, every woman needs that
everyone
rest.
does. And I got a little bit ahead of myself. I remember thinking I was so determined that I needed to show signs that I was recovering quickly, because I was worried otherwise that somehow I would, that I didn't want to struggle on the return. I wanted to come back fully recovered and ready to go. And so after week 1, went out for a walk around the block, and I remember about halfway around the block thinking this was a very bad idea. Taking a very long time to get home. But with everyone popping their cameras up from behind the trees as well, and breathless reports in the media that the Prime Minister was seen wheeling the baby down Camborne Avenue. No, there was a little bit of coverage when we went to the shops, so it was... I felt lucky to have that time, though. I remember reading it. Benazir Bhutto just went straight back because, of course, the tumultuous time that she was in. She may have had a fleet of nannies as well. Yes, that is true. Could be a small difference in support systems. You and Clark and your mum. Yes, that's right. We were a small but perfectly formed team. But it was a great experience, but it really gave me cause to think about other women's circumstances and why those periods of leave are so important. But ultimately, there wasn't really a choice. I know I needed to come back. I had the role of Prime Minister. I just couldn't and wouldn't take more time than that. And I knew that actually I had that privilege of being able to have Neve with me as well. So and I hear she's heard in the background of the odd radio interview. I was actually breastfeeding because I had to get out the door in order to do a regional visit, and so there was a van waiting downstairs for me, and I just multitasking. Yeah, but that's the ultimate. Yes, yeah. I thought that breastfeeding radio interview. But you just make it work, and I think there's probably a very both a female attitude, but a New Zealand attitude as well. Yeah, fantastic. With this 125 years giving us time for reflection, I know that you'll be doing the same thing as me and thinking about, what next, what for that next generation. What would you name as I guess your aims and goals are things that you'd even like us to see in 10 years, 20 years' time, looking back and seeing even more movement on? Well, I absolutely want to see the pay equity locked in. That over the course of a lifetime, a woman will earn as much as men on average. I want to see the domestic... We're trying really hard on that. Yep, and you're trying hard on that. And then the domestic and family violence rates just have to fall right away. And we have to explore what is it about our society which is seeing women and children treated like this. It's not nice. And maybe if we could have the same reflection around youth suicide, that would be a very important issue as well. But I think we also have to be mindful of women in circumstances which are much less fortunate than ours. I'm heading up to the Pacific to talk about women's political participation, but it's actually about women in decision making. Yeah. And women in societies have so many issues that if they're not in Parliament, as we've had the privilege to be in Parliament in significant numbers, these issues don't get addressed, like the violence, like the right to inheritance, like the economic independence, the ability to have your own bank account, the ability to access sexual and reproductive health services. They need women in decision making. Now, Solomon Islands, 1 woman MP. Papua New Guinea, no women MPs. And some of the highest rates of domestic violence and abuse, because women just don't have a voice and haven't had power. And I just won't settle for the argument women are
important behind the scenes. No, I want to see them important at the top table, not just behind the scenes.
I remember asking the question on a political trip through the Pacific and asking at each stop why it was that there wasn't greater representation of women in Parliament. And some of the statements I collected from varying men in positions of power were things like, well, the women argue too much, which I thought was a deep irony to that, and that they weren't seeking office. Well, I really challenge that, and I guess if you're not supported, of course it does make that much more difficult. Have you come across tools and ways of making sure we have more champions in the international work that you've done? Is it about women advocating for women? Have you successfully seen models where we have had those male champions?
Yes,
as well?
and I think it's very important that the women get together. You need strong National Council of Women's and the opinion leaders for women coming together to be then influential with pushing things with the men.
That's and even that moral support as well.
The moral support. And you need also to show the financial disadvantage to a country of women not being empowered. When I was at UNDP, I launched with the President of Kenya a report on what the gender gap in the workforce costs Africa. 95 billion a year as of 2 to 3 years ago. The President said it's a no-brainer. Clearly our countries are missing out because women don't have equal economic opportunity. So if no other argument works, always go for the economics because everybody's better off when women are financially empowered.
And we're seeing that through at a corporate level. We just need to now see it at a political level. I have to say, I always find, this for me is a moral issue, but as you say, if the economic argument works, it works. Whatever we can do to make sure that people see the importance of that representation.
I mean, an area that really needs movement in New Zealand is the top management and board positions. Now, actually, government boards have come a long way. I think we've still got to do more for women at top level of public service. But the private sector is really woeful. And all the research shows that the companies with significant numbers of women on their boards and in the senior management do better. What a surprise. They're attuned to the other half of the population.
Absolutely.
So, if they've got to act on the evidence. Norway legislated for it in the end. They said, there's going to be parity on boards. But, we've got pretty close to parity in our parliament without that. Could we get the private sector to move? And I won't buy the argument that the women aren't there. They are there, but they need to be encouraged to step up and come forward, and you have to go after them and recruit them.
You do have to be proactive, I think, for now. Maybe there'll be a time when we will have bridged that confidence divide, perhaps, and when we've created welcoming workplaces that cater for women's choices around care roles and so on. But 125 years later, and this last honours list was only the second time we've had 50% women recognised in our honours system.
That would be right.
And 125 years, and we still haven't reached 50% in Parliament. We still don't have pay equity, and we still have the financial security issues we've talked about. So he's hoping it doesn't take another 125.
It's within reach.
It is within reach.
Why shouldn't there be, within the next couple of parliaments, the next 10 years, absolute parity? When you get to 38.7, you're almost at 40.
Yes.
You're almost there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you cannot tell me that there aren't 60 women in New Zealand who deserve to be in Parliament.
More.
There might be. We might struggle to find 60 women who want to be in Parliament.
They have to be there.
They do have to be there. We need them. So it's a small price to pay.
Yeah. So what for you have been the proudest moments in your career as a woman trailblazer?
Yeah, well, I guess, I almost feel like I haven't earned my right to have a moment like that yet. I'm only a year in, and I keep thinking, gosh, Helen did 9 of these. I have to keep going. There are things, I know the things that make me feel motivated in politics. And just before I came here, today I was reading an email from someone who said, thank you for the families package. Because of you, I've been able to give my son guitar lessons. And that's a really big deal for me because I'm raising my kids on my own. Things like that, those are the moments I feel proud of. But I'll probably wait till I'm finished with my career in politics to pick the one thing. What about you?
Well, I still get messages like that.
Yeah.
They pop up on my Facebook page, or someone will find my email and they'll write and say, you made such a difference to my life because I was a single parent. It was possible for me to go to university. I was able to raise my children. I had a state house. You gave me a platform. And I think, well, that story could be told many times.
Yes.
That, you know, the things that I stood for and was able to help along with the whole team behind me, they gave people a chance. I think probably when I reflect, there's so many policy things you could say. I'm really proud I did that. I'm proud of standing up on the Iraq War issue. That was a no-brainer for me. But probably, I think, being a role model for younger women and girls to say, hey, look what Helen's done.
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were one at the time, though? Or were you just busy getting on with it?
Not in the earlier years, you were getting on with it, but certainly by the time you became PM, you were conscious that you were most absolutely a role model.
Yes.
I mean, leader of the opposition, no one aspires to be leader of the opposition. They want to be PM. Right? But when you're PM...
Sometimes they don't even want to do that.
No, they don't. But when you're PM, people say, hey, this is possible. This could be me. This could be my sister. This could be my aunt. You know, it makes it possible.
Yeah. Do you know, well, if I haven't had this opportunity till now to actually say thank you because of you, for me, you know, all of the things that you consider when you're doing a job like this about your ability and so on, gender never came into it for me. And that was because of you. Yeah. I have no doubt.
Because we assumed that we could do anything.
We assume, But there would have been, I'm sure without you, maybe it wouldn't have been that way for me.
Well, and I'm just so happy that I'm not the last. Right?
Yes,
You're not the third.
That's right.
And there will be a new generation of girls and young women saying, hey, Jacinda did it.
Yeah.
Because they've probably factored me out now. I've been away a while. But Jacinda's doing it. Hey, I could do that.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
That is what we want. I always have a very big mug of tea.
Didn't I have that? I had that green smoke-free mug always.
Oh yes, you did have a green tea.
I took it to New York and I still got it.
You still got it. They always laugh at me when I microwave my tea. I say, well, it's good enough for Helen.